Good morning. Welcome to day 16 of our embodiment series for the month of December. I feel like last night's, the one I recorded night before last, launched yesterday on the 15th, into the mysteries. I feel like that particular walk felt like a turning point for me, which is interesting because it's like halfway through our practice before the last 15 days, plus our closing ceremony. And I utilized inspiration that I didn't express to you. So, riding the line of sharing versus privacy, and also tuning and tapping into the sort of field of existence and intergenerational patterns to embody, much like family constellations, which is a form of therapy that I linked down below last time. I'll link it again in the description in case you're interested. That utilizes a lot of this sort of embodied attunement to the unseen and the content that can come up just by connecting to an intention, a touch, relationality. And so I'm wanting to bring a little bit more of that into practice today. I have a couple ideas. I'm not sure where to start. So I'm going to talk through them and I'm going to see what the options bring up in my body and then feel forward into what feels like the most suited match. I have this journal called Building the Best You, a 2-year discovery journal by Caroline Harper. And I found just like in the $5 section at a Barnes and Noble a long time ago. And I started this book in 2015. It is now 2022, tail end of. And I started it. It was meant to be like a match card of like 365 days side by side. You journal through one side and then the other page by page. So you go back and you start the journal over the following year. I didn't catch that. I wasn't reading the directions and I just started filling in both days. And I was going to let that be okay and take the time it needed to take. And then I realized that there were these sections that asked you to fill in these different sections of like year 1, year 2 of like check-in points. And then I was like, oh, maybe I should go back and do it again since I have a year 1, year 2. So then I started the process by separating things. My intention was to complete the first year and then go back and then just not have a full second year. And the dates would be off. I don't know why I'm telling you all of this, but for some reason it feels right. So I'm going to just keep going. So now I've picked this book up and put it down and picked it up and put it down and like let it fall into its own sort of experience of my life, regardless of the intention of the book and how it was made. And letting that be okay, letting there be like a creative license, I guess, in that. So maybe this is where we come full circle with the performing arts, with being a creative in the world, with embodying inspiration or channeling our energies in order to create and cultivate a certain kind of intentional story. Sometimes the path as it was laid out for us ends up not making as much sense as it was intended, and or sometimes the intention is cloudy and sometimes our relationship to what was intended is we have a hard time discerning for whatever myriad of reasons that could be. It could be a trauma thing, a neurodivergent thing. It could be a cycle in your life experience where things are just a little bit more than you can tackle and you don't have the focus or the spoons or the bandwidth or the ability to toggle or track. And I want to sort of normalize that is such a part of the human experience, and so much of how we expect ourselves to show up neurotypically in the societal world is to either pretend like that doesn't happen or minimize it as much as possible so we can show up more accurately. And there's a lot of lack of forgiving, I feel like, happens internally and externally, as far as when you have an outcome or a goal in mind, that the most important thing is that you meet that goal. And while I think it can be so beautiful and so helpful and important and really truly necessary to have clarity of intention and the direction one wants to go and the outcome one desires to feel into, when we start hanging our self-worth on that and when we start assigning whether or not we're valued or valuable ourselves or others based on that, that's when I think we run into a lot of challenges that become more like a perpetrator, victim, savior kind of triad, right? Which I believe those are I think those are the roles that are in very specific triad that's talked about in psychology storytelling. So, and we tell a lot of those as performing artists, where you get stuck into this triad loop. A lot of what I feel myself in currently is an interest in seeing the patterns of the triads of my own life so that I can choose different stories, so that I can evolve the cycles and loops of that perpetrator victim savior experience and let there be more of a healing and integrative process, a place where I don't have to fight. I don't have to save. I don't have to feel harmed. I recognize that perhaps it's a bit of like a Pollyanna perspective to move into the world with, which is this great wide world of open seas of who knows what and where and when. And at the same time, I'm also aware that there are certain tools, certain strategies, certain ways that we can connect with one another that intentionally cultivates a safer space, intentionally comes back to connection points that become increasingly available to things working out and not having to feel like you're at war with life, at war with art, at war with yourself, and instead meet the creative block or blockages that you have and find ways to dissolve or integrate, digest certain things. And at the same time, knowing that sometimes for periods of time or for cycles, there is a degree of resistance, pushback, and sometimes we need to push through something at the same time. Yet I find that when we push through, if there's a degree of surrendering to an open heart and a strong spine and a leading forward of being guided by some sort of energetic life force that's willing to have your back and help you push, then there's something there that I find very resistant to victimization. So there's a resiliency in it. There's a sort of clarity. I was talking to one of my best friends last night and trying to figure out what video to kind of come into connection with today. And one of the things that came up for us, so much came up for us, and then I just lost the tail and the thread of what I was going to share. So I'm going to sit in the empty space of that for a moment and then just see if there's something else that wants to come in. So my finger is pointing at another resource I brought in today. I wasn't sure if I was going to share. And that is this old journal from a long time ago, for me, from years ago. On the front, there's a quote, a Jane Austen quote. And the quote says, "Her own thoughts and reflections were habitually her best companions." And I talk in the book about how much I feel that. And in this book, there's a lot of resistance and struggle and overwhelm and flooding and also gratitude and idealization, or I don't know how much it was idealization versus just not being able to see the forest for the trees kind of experience. But there was some degree of that victim mode of feeling like I had to save myself because I didn't know how to be in my experience, and I felt like there was something wrong. I was broken, or something was broken, or I needed to do something in a certain way. And how do I want to say this? It feels important that I leave this as broad as possible so that there's like metaphor of pattern recognition for the collective you that watch. There was like this blame of myself that I wasn't able to show up in a certain kind of way that I felt like I should or was supposed to, and that I was also told by society and people in my community that I should and was supposed to. And my body and my mental state and my capacity were not in a place where I didn't have the ability. There was a complete lack of access to resources that could help me with that. And others expected me to figure out a way to find access to those resources. And all that would happen was the more that I would try, the more I would be flooded and overwhelmed and feel more broken. And then the same thing would happen again and again. I'm reading it now and I'm like, oh my gosh, like it was so painful. A lot of it, I think, ties back into my embodiment from yesterday of that divide, that splintering of a psyche where one couldn't cope and the other one was pointing a finger saying, this is your fault. There's something wrong with you. You need to fix yourself. And then the other one, eventually, this was the healing that wanted to come through last night, came up and was like, no, there's nothing wrong with me. And I don't have to want what you tell me I'm supposed to want. It's okay for me to not want what you say I'm supposed to want. and this is who I am. I need to send away messaging, energy, history, context that's going to loop me back into the cycle of broken. So I guess I want to walk that. Think about that today. Feels like the embodiment. Like I am no longer the cycle of broken. Does that work? I am no longer the cycle of broken. I want to, before I do this, I also want to bring in one more resource to just bring into the fold of awareness, right? And I'll link the things down so you can look. But it's a book called The War of Art, Break Through the Blocks and Win Your Inner Creative Battles by Steven Pressfield. Creative work is a gift to the world and every being in it. Don't cheat us of your contribution. Give us what you've got. Quote by Steven Pressfield. And then do you, underneath, questions. Dream about writing the great American novel. Regret not finishing your paintings, poems, or screenplays. Want to start a business or charity. Wish you could start dieting or exercising today. Hope to run a marathon someday. If you answered yes to any of these questions, then you need the art of war. little sales pitch. So continuing on, it says, in this powerful straight from the hip examination of the internal obstacles to success, best-selling author Steven Pressfield shows readers how to identify, defeat, and unlock the inner barriers to creativity. The War of Art is an inspirational, funny, well-aimed kick in the pants guaranteed to galvanize every would-be artist, visionary, or entrepreneur. I'm going to open to a page. I'm going to read two of the pages. I have page 94 and 95. The first page is, and they're just short little quotes. A professional recognizes her limitations. She gets an agent, she gets a lawyer, she gets an accountant. She knows she can only be a professional at one thing. She brings in other pros and treats them with respect. Next section. A professional reinvents himself. Goldie Hawn once observed that there are only 3 ages for an actress in Hollywood: Babe, DA, and Driving Miss Daisy. She was making a different point, but the truth remains. As artists, we serve the Muse, capital M, and the Muse may have more than one job for us over our lifetime. The professional does not permit himself to become hidebound within one incarnation, however comfortable or successful. Like a transmigrating soul, he shucks his outward body and dons a new one. He continues his journey. Which is interesting because yesterday I also had another conversation with someone who's like a executive at one of the big places. We had a conversation about the impact that happens on the psyche when you go in for these roles where you're trying to be or become the most generic version of the specific targeted market of your character type, whatever that is for you. We all have different categories that either our agents or that our representation might pitch us for, and it may or may not align to the core authenticity of who we are. In fact, in many ways, it likely won't, because in general, there's a generality that is desired or designed intentionally within, if you're navigating like cast stability and casting out in industry standards, as opposed to really just forging your own career and deciding you know what you want. You're just going to go get it, right? If you're trying to fit into the frameworks of like where you think you could be positioned, it does something to the psyche when you are like, okay, I'm going to be this person over here for this day, according to the gaze of society and where it's at psychorelationally in regards to gender, in regards to race, in regards to all of the things that play out in the sort of psychological framework that in the dream that we digest overarchingly as a collective from media cycles, what sells, what is going to get views, what the masses are able to digest. There tends to be a sort of limited dimensionality. Not always. I know there's another quote, I don't remember who said it, but something along the lines of like, there are no small parts, just small actors. And I think that it's a beautiful sentiment. And also there's a lot of complex challenges that are just out there in the industry. And I think to place that kind of a mental framework onto something is not that it doesn't have its place sometimes, But I think that if we come back to little turns of phrases like that to help us recommit into something when there is blatant prejudice happening or a narrative that we're like, this isn't good, like, I don't want to perpetuate that. I think that it can do more harm than good sometimes, not all the time, sometimes. And being aware of those dividing lines or those tipping points, I guess, is something I'm curious about, the tipping points, because there's no one perfect answer that's always going to be right. And context is so important. And I think that part of what I'm moving through today in this eventual embodiment session is the nuance of context. So I'm going to, I think for today, I want to read to you first these journaling exercises, see what the embodiment leads into. I want to connect around these questions for you as prompts for you to ask yourself, either for your own embodiments or for journaling practice or for just reflection or meditation. But I'm going to read them, pause, read them, pause. And then in the self-care garden for members, I'll do a printable download for you too, so that you can print that out and type it out or just copy it down into your journal and have it. So here we go. Question. You can sit back, quiet your mind if you want. Scribble them down and hit pause so you have them. Do I enjoy spending time with others? Just listen to your body and go with whatever, like first thought, best thought. Be honest there. Would I like to connect with more people? And there might be layers to some of these questions. There might be like an outer reflective persona answer and an inner, more authentic or recessed answer to some of these questions. Do I feel happy when I'm alone? Do I feel safe and secure when I'm by myself? Do I need others to feel whole? And this is without judging ourselves for how we're answering, just letting ourselves be honest and spill onto the page or emote and express freely, or sink into the body in a depth of presence and be with what comes up and allowing what arises to arise. Does my life include other people? I want to say before I move on to that, everybody's life includes other people. So if your answer is no, that's an interesting answer, and keep going with that and see what you find and connect with. And also just as like a awareness that of course it does, it always does, it has to innately to be a person in the world. So your perspective though is part of the folding process of uncovering more self-security, self-knowledge, self-understanding, self-cultivating a more caring relationship to self, whatever self is, however self presents itself. What was my high point in the preceding weeks? What was the low point? Did the time flow smoothly? Did I create goals? Did I work towards those goals? Did I achieve those goals? Okay, I'm just going to walk something in relationship to all of that. If you want to pause and just journal through that or do your own practice, feel free to hit pause and come back to the rest later. I'm going to integrate all of the everything that we just did, and I'm going to walk a thing, whatever that thing is. We're going to embody a thing. Okay. Ooh. Sitting cross-legged too long, my knee started to hurt. Okay. I am now whatever needs to come through between us, you and I that are here today. I'm unsure if I'm like gonna dance for you or if I'm gonna just narrate to you how I'm doing, how I'm feeling. I have an ache in my right knee. I felt when I stepped into this experience of embodiment that I wanted to like connect to the left side of my like reproductive organ area and attune to that. And then I had this left arm out. But it feels like stabilized and stabilizing. I don't feel like I'm trying to people please with it or even offer you anything necessarily. I've just sort of like got the thing I've got to got the thing I've got to got. Like I feel like this is all connected to my bone structure, and I feel like I've got it. Like it might be on the hip, but it's structurally sound enough, close enough to my core form that like I got this. I see myself like doing turns and like I don't know why, like um that's an interesting, like a very specific like lifting of the leg. And I'm wanting to like brandage arm around and bring it to the back. Attitude. Very like specific ballet move. There's this like feeling of with that particular one of like arc and flying or position and soaring, depending on the trajectory that I utilize, the tension of my limbs. I felt really good for a moment to just like utilize my limbs, feel like I had agency of connection with the outside world, almost like swimming or flying, like being able to have like fins or ability to move or wings to explore. I'm aware of my feet, foot pads, wanting to feel into their softness, and then let whatever happens happen. There's like a wiggly release that happens. Like I feel like one of those, you know, dancing in the wind, like they look like little people, but they are like made out of like flag material. And then the wind comes up and it like blows them up and open and then back down. I'm reminded of the concept of the muse with the that was talked about in the work of art. Hey, wait for the muse. Oh, I love that. I want to like experience that. I'm now waiting for the muse. I feel like I am muse. I feel like there's this embodiment of like willingness to be like a vessel to the muse, that I'm not being used by the muse. The muse is allowing me to feel her, to sense her, to explore as her in this really like lovely, loving way where there's this like soul connection, that feeling of like, oh, she loves me, she's safe. She feels like I'm safe. She knows that I love her. So therefore we can get along. There's not like a, oh, I'm aware of yesterday when I was collapsed down here and I was pointing at myself here. It was all your fault. There's this sense that like she wasn't allowed there. She was almost like over here, like not being able to bear witness to it, like cringing from it. There's this desire now that I have to go to like the yesterday's walk. I was for embodiments. I was like with the upper 45-degree angle. And I was like, get out of here. I kind of want to see what happens if I place myself over there and see like what's the consciousness, what's the conscious awareness that I was like, get out of here to yesterday. Light. It feels like I like want to put that to bed. Like I want to make that quiet so I can look over here. Like shh, shh, like shh, you don't matter. I'm over here now. Shh. Like stop. Stop that. Like you're not worthy of my time. I'm not interested. Not interested. It's like there's an awareness that it doesn't matter if I did or didn't do anything to perpetuate that. But I need to move on. And I feel like cold-hearted. Like my heart just went like clammed up. And there's this idea that like you don't have anything to do with. Just don't have anything to do with what? With, just with. There's no with over here. I choose not have a with here. And I don't know what's over there, but I'm looking at my other chair in the window. And I kind of want to go sit on it and even change like the framing of the Zoom. So I'm going to do that. I'm aware that this is my setup I used for my other project, Pages in Process. And I just want to like be here. Oh, I just had a lot of movement. And my relationship to the up there is sort of like, get off my back. I don't want you. It was focused over here and I'm like F off, like I don't, not interested. And then over here, like it doesn't feel like it's impacting me. Like it feels like something that's been moved through. It feels like something that like I can look back on. But like the reason I can is because this, I have clear boundaries over here. This thing that was looking at me, cold-hearted. Oh, that feels done. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. Shake it off. Shake it off. Okay. I'm gonna invite you back into your body if you're not already there. Rub your hands together. Place them somewhere that needs it. Maybe your heart, maybe your throat, maybe your belly, maybe your head, maybe your shoulders, maybe your jaw, maybe your eyes. And just give a little TLC to yourself. And anything that, and I'm aware that, well, okay, what's interesting, because we were talking about what we were talking about, like victim, savior, perpetrator. And I feel like there was a degree of like, definitely victim of the fallen down person from yesterday's embodiment. It's like, I don't know who the savior was trying to be. I guess that the perpetrator must be the up at the 45-degree angle. And the savior must have been the fractured, like, it's all your fault. Which, I mean, that's, I guess, the savior. It's all your fault. Like, fix yourself, or like, I can't, or like, I'm going to save us because you can't do the thing you're supposed to be able to do. And from over here, it's like, I still might be being looked at by the perpetrator, like ready to like focus over here on me. And I'm like, I don't want I don't want your stuff. Not interested in playing that game. I remove myself from the triad, from the triangle. I'm not going to wind up in the way that I know things happen when I let you in. Like a big no. No. And I feel called to read one more of these. Invoking the Muse. Oh, it's a three-parter. Approaching the Mystery. Okay, so there's Approaching the Mystery and then a three-part Invoking the Muse. The third part, which is the one I opened to, was flagged, little dog-eared, and I feel compelled to read the other ones. I'm not sure here or like later, but I know that I want to read the part 3, the Invoking the Muse, the one I really pulled to. Sometimes I read things backwards. Let's try that today. We're going to read this backwards. We're going to start with part 3, Invoking the Muse, and see if some of the previous ones want to come through after or not. So this is from page 119 in The War of Art. Artists have invoked the Muse since time immemorial. There is great wisdom to this. There is magic to effacing our human arrogance and humbly entreating help from a source we cannot see, hear, touch, or smell. Here's the start of Homer's Odyssey, the T.E. Lawrence translation. You ready? Here's the start of it. O divine Posy, goddess, daughter of Zeus, sustain for me this song of the various-minded man who, after he had plundered the innermost citadel of hallowed Troy, was made to stray grievously about the coasts of men, the sport of their customs, good and bad, while his heart, through all the seafaring, ached with an agony to redeem himself and bring his company safe home. Vain hope for them, the fools, their own witlessness cast them aside, to destroy for meat the oxen of the most exalted sun, wherefore the sun god blotted out the day of their return. Make this tale live for us in all its many bearings, O Muse. There's something in me that's aware that part of what I'm saying no more to over here is actually the hero's journey, which is what this is from. Like, well, I mean, the Odyssey is one of the many tales and iterations of the hero's journey, which appears throughout the world in different societies as these tales. So the Odyssey, the story of Jesus, the story of Luke Skywalker, there's others that are listed too. If you're interested more in this, Hero of a Thousand Faces by, what's his name? Famous man who writes about the hero's journey a lot. I can't remember. I'll link it, his name. Continuing on, this passage will reward closer study. First, divine Posy. When we invoke the Muse, we are calling on a force not just from a different plane of reality, but from a holier plane. I'm like, no. Truthfully, my experience is that you have to be on the same plane as the Muse in order to really be in stewardship of the Muse. And that I get what Stephen Pressfield is saying is that like it's an invisible attunement in some ways, and so we can attune to it that way. And also there's part of me that's like, no. And that's the part that I feel like the Muse trusts inside of me, or at least the Muse that I work with. I think there's, you know, we can all connect to the concept of Muse differently, and we can all have different creative channels that we're opening for to gain access to. So Stephen Pressfield's is his and his own, and mine is mine and my own, and mine happens to be reluctantly subversive. I mean, it's very subversive. I'm reluctant with how subversive my patterns and my plays and the pieces and parts of the etheric plane that want to live through me, that want to speak as me, that want to be a part of the world through the vessel that I embody. We kind of want to tear shit up a little bit, including really beautiful, wonderful, pivotal, impactful works. So continuing on, goddess, daughter of Zeus. Not only are we invoking divine intercession, but intercession on the highest level, just one remove from the top. I'm going to keep quiet there. Sustain for me. Homer doesn't ask for brilliance or success. He just wants to keep this thing going. This song, what about, that about covers it. From the brothers Karamazov to your new venture in the plumbing supply business. I love the summation of Odysseus's trials that comprises the body of the invocation. It's Joseph Campbell. It's Joseph Campbell's hero's journey in a nutshell. There's the name I was looking for. As concise a synopsis of the story of every man as it gets. And my articulation is that the story of every man is part of what keeps us in perpetual uh, victim, perpetrator, savior triad that I want to get out of. I want out of it. I want out of it. I want out of it. I want no. Not that there's not place for it. Not that it's not still going to be integrated in a part of life. And also whatever wants to move through me as me, that I'm like, all right, Muse, come on through, is like, There's the initial crime, which we all inevitably commit, which ejects the hero from his homebound complacency and propels him upon his wanderings. The yearning for redemption, the untiring campaign to get home, meaning back to, there's that God word I don't like, back to God's grace, back to himself. I admire particularly the warning against the second crime, to destroy for meat the oxen of the most exalted son. That's the felony that calls down soul destruction, to destroy for meat the oxen of the most exalted son. The employment of the sacred for profane means, prostitution, selling out. Lastly, the artist's wish for his work. Make this tale live for us in all its many bearings, O Muse. That's what we want, isn't it? More than make it great, make it live, and not for one angle only, but in all its many bearings. Okay, we've said our prayer. We're ready to work. Now what? Okay, so the concept of prostitution and selling out. I think that something, I'm just going to let this come through the me that whatever wants to come through wants to speak from. So the prostitution is selling out, that like there is also in different modalities or perspectives or ways of connecting and communing with the everything, the things that transpire and move through us, that there is this sort of sacred prostitute though that can come into play. And there is the importance of selling, of sales in a relationally nourishing, drinking in of something that is supposed to sustain us. And so this is not to say that there aren't ways to interpret what I read in a way that makes sense for you. And there is something along the lines of the way my body is positioning in this life that I have to say, I also see how so many of us have interpreted things like that in ways that are hurtful. And I need to have the conversation about those things. Okay, let's move back. Testament of a visionary. Eternity is in love with the creations of time, William Blake. The visionary poem William Blake was, so I understand, one of those half-mad avatars who appear in flesh from time to time. Savants capable of ascending for brief periods to loftier planes and returning to share the wonders they have seen. Shall we try to decipher the meaning of the verse above? What Blake means by eternity, I think, is the sphere higher than this one, a plane of reality superior to the material dimension in which we dwell. I'm angry there. I get angry because I'm like, no, we dwell there. Just tune into it. It is part of the everything, the all. There are practices to help you connect to it. And it's a very practical thing. If you have practices that tune you there, and I get that like societally, perhaps that's not something that many of us were brought into, many of us were trained into, many of us have the attunement for, and even in the ways in which I have been connected and cycling in this sort of realm for the duration of time immemorial, life, connection, spots of the all, the everything, the nothing. Eternity is in love with the creations of time. To me, there's like the poeticism of that. Like I just feel it and I go, oh, that's the place in my body that I go to know that. And it's a knowing, it's a being, a becoming, as opposed to a theoreticizing and like, what does he mean by that? And I find that a lot of my frustrations with self-care for performers is I want you to have a felt experience. I want to have a felt experience. I want you to have a felt experience. It is about an embodiment of something, of understanding, of clarity, of being able to not think of higher realms as above us or this sort of lesser than, more than relationship that I think gets paired into sort of the hierarchical concepts and structures of the parts of patriarchy that have been really harmful throughout the time and space. And I feel a lot of it here. And I think that also I'm very clear the war on art, like I don't want to do anything that takes a war. I do not want to participate. I'm like pacifist. If there's war involved, I am out. We're going to find a way through in healthy relating, or we're not going to play. And my, that's my like no, stop. And I think that like maybe I don't need to keep going back further into the beginnings of that. If you want to read it, pick up the book. It is a good book. I do recommend it. It is a classic. It is something very pivotal, and there is a lot of really good content inside of it. But much like other books that use the God word in certain ways, I just like, I can't with it. I can't with it as that framework still exists, just accepting as the norm. Like if it doesn't include the deconstruction of what that word represents and means and how it's been used and how it's been weaponized, I don't want to come near it. Just not for me. And that's not to say there can't still be wonderful things within the context of it. It can't be utilized in certain degrees, in certain ways that are beneficial. And that's just where I'm at. This is the me that wants to come through. Thank you for being here with me. We'll be back tomorrow. Keep seeing where these embodiments lead. I'll drop all the things that I told you I drop into the self-care garden and into the description below. Let me know how it goes with your own practice or witnessing mine. And in this journey, if anything is cropping up as resistance for you, if you want to speak to me from the edge of that while containing, without dumping onto me about anything that's coming up, but you can express from a contained experience of talking about your experience, even the challenging pieces, if that's necessary. And even more so, I would encourage you to journal about it, talk to a therapist about it, unpack it with a friend, take it into some sort of creative venture or activity. And if you really want more space directly held for you in any kind of way, if this is like really like, you're like, no, I want to keep going with this and deconstructing my constructs, then the private mentorship would be such a wonderful place for you. That I have creative connection cycles, and there are sliding scale, and they're open in a flex mode for how long of a cycle you want to cycle together. But cycles are important, and understanding that we enter and exit something in flow with intention, that we keep coming back, that trust is built over time for a durational amount of experience together is what feels right to me. Wishing you well. Till next time, see you tomorrow.